Have you ever cried and immediately felt embarrassed? Like your body betrayed you in public. Your eyes started burning, your throat got tight, your voice did that weird little shaky thing, and suddenly you were fighting for your life in a conversation that was supposed to be casual. Maybe someone said, "Don't be so sensitive." Maybe someone rolled their eyes. Maybe you told yourself, "Why am I like this?" And from that moment on, crying became something you tried to control, hide, or apologize for. But what if crying easily is not a sign that you are emotionally weak? What if it is actually a sign that your nervous system is processing more information than most people can even detect? Today, we are going to break down the psychology of people who cry easily, why it happens, what it reveals about your brain, and why the world has completely misunderstood emotional sensitivity. And stay until the end, because the final part of this video will explain the difference between being emotionally sensitive and being emotionally unregulated. And that difference can change the way you see yourself forever. Because no, you are not broken. You may just be running a much more advanced emotional operating system. Unfortunately, nobody gave you the user manual. So let's write one. Most people treat crying like a malfunction, as if tears mean system error, human has failed. But psychologically, crying is not failure. Crying is processing. It is your brain and body trying to metabolize emotional information. Think about it like this. Some people process emotion like a slow-loading web page from 2007. They feel something, but it takes 3 to 5 business days to understand what happened. Other people process emotion instantly. A change in someone's tone, a painful memory, a sentence that hits a little too close to home, a beautiful scene in a movie, a stranger being kind to an old man in a grocery store, and boom, tears. Not because they are dramatic, not because they want attention, but because their emotional system is fast, responsive, and deeply connected. People who cry easily often don't just feel their own emotions. They absorb emotional signals from the environment. They notice tension in a room before anyone says a word. They detect sadness behind someone's smile. They hear the difference between "I'm fine" and "I'm fine, but please ask me again." This is why crying easily can be exhausting. You are not just living your life. You are also receiving emotional notifications from everyone else's life. And there is no unsubscribe button. Not yet. But later in this video, I'll show you how to stop confusing emotional depth with emotional responsibility. Because that is where sensitive people get trapped. Here is the simplest way to understand this. Some people experience life in standard definition. You experience it in 4K, maybe even IMAX, with surround sound, and subtitles, and a dramatic soundtrack you did not ask for. This does not mean you are better than other people. It means your nervous system may be more reactive to emotional, sensory, and social information. In psychology, there is a trait often called sensory processing sensitivity. People with this trait tend to process stimulation more deeply, notice subtleties more easily, and become overwhelmed more quickly when too much is happening at once. Research often estimates that a significant minority of people have this kind of high sensitivity, roughly around 1 in 5 people depending on the framework used. That means you are not too much. You are not some rare emotional alien accidentally dropped into a world full of robots. Although, let's be honest, some meetings at work do feel like that. You may simply be built with stronger emotional sensors. This explains why small things can affect you deeply. A harsh comment may stay in your mind for hours. A beautiful song may change your entire mood. A conflict may feel physically painful. A crowded room may drain you even if everyone is technically nice. And when your system reaches saturation, tears become the release valve. This is important. Crying is not always sadness. Sometimes crying is overload. Sometimes crying is relief. Sometimes crying is empathy. Sometimes crying is your nervous system saying, there are too many tabs open, and one of them is playing music. And this is where most people misunderstand sensitive people. They assume the tears are the problem. But the tears are often the signal. The real issue is the emotional load that built up before the tears appeared. And in a minute, we are going to talk about why people who cry easily are often emotionally intelligent, but also why emotional intelligence can become a burden when you don't have boundaries. There is a strange pattern among emotionally sensitive people. They often see the truth before anyone wants to admit it. They notice when a friendship is changing. They notice when someone is secretly hurt. They notice when the room gets colder after one sentence. They notice when someone says, "No worries," but absolutely, definitely has worries. And because they notice so much, they often carry emotional information nobody else wants to touch. This is where crying comes in. Tears can happen when your mind understands something before you have language for it. You are not crying because you are fragile. You may be crying because you are perceiving emotional reality faster than you can explain it. That is why some people cry during arguments. Not because they are trying to win, not because they are manipulating, not because they are playing the victim. Sometimes they cry because their brain is processing the conflict, the tone, the rejection, the fear of being misunderstood, and the memory of every other time they felt unheard, all at once. That is not weakness. That is cognitive and emotional overload. The problem is that society respects anger more than tears. If someone raises their voice, people call them passionate. If someone cries, people call them unstable. Interesting little double standard, isn't it? Anger gets promoted to leadership. Tears get sent to the bathroom. But psychologically, tears can be much more honest than anger. Anger often protects the ego. Tears reveal the wound. And most people are terrified of wounds, especially their own. So when they see someone cry easily, they judge it. Not because crying is weak, but because it reminds them of the emotions they have spent years suppressing. And suppression has a cost. We will come back to that, because the next part is the one most sensitive people desperately need to hear. Empathy is beautiful. It allows you to connect, understand, comfort, and love deeply. But empathy without boundaries becomes emotional debt. You start feeling responsible for everyone's mood. You walk into a room and scan for tension. You adjust your personality so nobody feels uncomfortable. You apologize when you did nothing wrong. You explain yourself too much. You replay conversations like a detective investigating a crime scene. Except the crime scene is just someone saying "okay" with a weird tone. This is why sensitive people often feel tired. They are not weak. They are over-functioning emotionally. They are doing invisible labor all day. Smiling when they feel heavy. Monitoring reactions. Trying not to disappoint people. Trying not to be too much. Trying to make everyone feel safe while quietly abandoning themselves. And eventually, the body says, "Enough." Then come the tears. Not because the situation was small, but because the accumulation was huge. This is the part nobody sees. They see you cry over one little thing. They don't see the 74 things you swallowed before that moment. They don't see the emotional inbox you never cleared. They don't see the pressure you put on yourself to be kind, calm, understanding, available, and easy to love. So here is the truth. If you cry easily, you may not need thicker skin. You may need cleaner boundaries. You may need to stop turning every emotion in the room into your personal assignment. This is exactly the kind of mental rewiring we talk about on Rewire Your Brain. Because emotional freedom does not come from feeling less. It comes from carrying less. And once you understand that, sensitivity stops being a curse. It becomes data, but only if you learn how to read it. Crying is not just psychological. It is physiological. When emotions build up, the body reacts. Your breathing changes. Your chest tightens. Your throat contracts. Your muscles tense. Your nervous system activates. Then crying can help discharge some of that pressure. Research on crying suggests that emotional tears are connected to complex physiological, social, and self-soothing processes. Scientists still debate exactly how and when crying helps, but it is clearly more than being dramatic. That means crying is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it is a regulation attempt. Your body is trying to return to balance. Think of tears like steam leaving a pressure cooker. Would you call the steam weak? No. You would call it the thing preventing the kitchen from becoming a crime scene. Same with tears. They help release intensity before it gets trapped somewhere else. Because emotions do not disappear just because you refuse to express them. They usually relocate. Into your jaw, into your stomach, into insomnia, into irritability, into overthinking. Into eating snacks at midnight while pretending you are just not tired. And yes, we've all been there. The body keeps receipts. So when you cry, your body may be saying, "Finally, we are not pretending anymore." But here is the crucial point. Crying can be healthy. Living in constant emotional flooding is not. And that brings us to the most important distinction in this entire video. 6. Sensitive is not the same as unregulated. This is where we need to be honest. Crying easily does not make you weak. But if your emotions control your decisions, your relationships, and your self-worth, then sensitivity has turned into dysregulation. And that needs attention. Not shame, attention. Being sensitive means you feel deeply. Being dysregulated means you cannot return to emotional balance. Being sensitive means you notice subtle emotional shifts. Being dysregulated means those shifts hijack your entire day. Being sensitive means someone's pain moves you. Being dysregulated means someone's mood becomes your identity. There is a difference. And understanding that difference is power. Because the goal is not to become cold. The goal is not to become numb. The goal is not to become one of those people who says, "I don't care," while clearly caring so much they are emotionally constipated. The goal is to become emotionally grounded, to feel deeply without drowning, to cry without collapsing, to care without carrying, to notice everything without absorbing everything. That is emotional maturity. Not the absence of tears, the ability to stay connected to yourself while the tears are there. So if you cry easily, stop asking, "How do I stop being sensitive?" Ask better questions. What is my body trying to tell me? What boundary did I ignore? What emotion have I been suppressing? What story am I attaching to this moment? Is this my pain? Or am I carrying someone else's? Those questions create self-awareness. And self-awareness is where healing begins. People who cry easily often have rich inner worlds. They imagine deeply. They love deeply. They grieve deeply. They connect dots quickly. They are moved by beauty, kindness, injustice, music, memory, silence, and sometimes a dog reunion video on the internet, which is completely valid. Those videos are emotionally illegal. But this depth is not damage. It is capacity. The capacity to be touched by life. The capacity to care when cynicism would be easier. The capacity to remain human in a world that often rewards emotional armor. And yes, there are challenges. Sensitive people need recovery time. They need honest relationships. They need environments that do not constantly attack their nervous system. They need to stop apologizing for having emotional reactions. And they need to stop giving unlimited access to people who make them feel ashamed for being real. Because the wrong environment can make sensitivity feel like a disorder. But the right environment can make it look like intuition, creativity, compassion, and emotional intelligence. So maybe the question is not, why do I cry so easily? Maybe the better question is, why have I been living in places where my sensitivity had no room to breathe? That question changes everything. So what do you actually do with all of this? First, stop humiliating yourself for crying. Shame adds a second wound on top of the first one. You already feel overwhelmed. You do not need to add, and now I hate myself for being overwhelmed. That is not healing. That is emotional bullying with extra steps. Second, name what is happening. Say, I am emotionally overloaded, or I feel hurt, or my nervous system needs a minute. Language gives shape to emotion. And once an emotion has shape, it becomes less terrifying. Third, create space before responding. Sensitive people often feel pressure to explain themselves immediately. Don't. Pause. Breathe. Drink water. Step away. Let your system settle before you turn your feelings into a full TED Talk. Fourth, set boundaries with people who mock your emotions. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerable side. If someone consistently makes you feel small for feeling deeply, they are not helping you become stronger. They are training you to abandon yourself. And finally, learn to treat your tears as information, not identity. Crying is something you do. It is not all of who you are. You are not the emotional one. You are a person with a responsive nervous system, a deep emotional range, and a need for regulation, safety, and self-respect. That is not weakness. That is humanity with the volume turned up. So if you cry easily, listen carefully. You are not broken. You are not childish. You are not weak. You are not too much. You may simply feel life before other people have even noticed it arrived. Your tears are not proof that you cannot handle life. Sometimes they are proof that you are actually letting life touch you. And in a world where so many people are emotionally shut down, distracted, defensive, and disconnected, that is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to understand. But remember this. Your sensitivity is a gift only when it has boundaries. Without boundaries, it becomes exhaustion. With boundaries, it becomes intuition. Without regulation, it becomes overwhelm. With regulation, it becomes wisdom. So the next time tears come, don't immediately ask, "What is wrong with me?" Ask, "What is my body trying to protect, release, or reveal?" Because your tears may not be the problem. They may be the doorway. And the moment you stop fighting your sensitivity, you can finally start using it. To understand yourself. to connect more honestly, to choose better environments, to build healthier relationships, and most importantly, to stop treating your emotional depth like a defect. Because it was never weakness. It was always information. You just needed to learn how to read it.